Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Jacob. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thanks so much for taking time out for this.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks, Jag.
Jacob, let's start with how Nexus Academics happened.
Sure. I'll go back for the origin story briefly.
Sure.
I graduated from university with a degree in music. My intention was to move to New York and become a professional musician. And as many young musicians and actors do, because you can't make a living in music, I looked for a job on the side to pay the bills. I had a friend who had begun doing tutoring for the SAT the year before with a company in New York, and she said, oh, this would be great for you. She was also an actress, so she set me up with an interview. I went into the office, had my interview, and I found myself very quickly with a full-time schedule teaching SATs. So that was back in the middle of 2002, and I was with that company nearly 10 years. I expanded my portfolio of content from the SAT and ACT into other standardized tests, both the middle school tests as well as graduate level exams, GRE, GMAT, LSAT. I did a lot of academic tutoring, a lot of admissions consulting. I wrote materials. I trained other tutors. And got very highly involved in sort of business development for the company. And then around 2011, I ended up having a client who had 4 children who needed somebody full time. And so he approached my boss and said, I'd like to steal Jake from you. And so they worked something out, and I worked for that client exclusively for 2 years. And then when 2 of the kids had gone off to college and the schedule became less, I shifted with that client into an hourly model. And he gave his blessing. He said, go off and find some more clients and I'll help you and I'll set you up with a couple of my friends and their kids. And so that was 2012. And I founded my company and began expanding my roster of students and clients for sure, but additionally brought on other tutors when necessary, and expanded sort of the breadth of what I did at Nexus. So that was nearly 12 years ago, I think, and here we are.
Wow, very nice. That's a nice story, unique one.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, so many. I'm yet to hear something that's common. At least the way you narrated it was very beautiful. Jacob, what happened to the music track?
It's a great question. You're a musician for life, right? You never stop being a musician.
Right.
I was an opera singer. I sang around the world. Spent some time as a stage director as well. I loved my work, was very happy with it, but my wife got pregnant in 2012, and I was forced with the balancing act of, what does it mean to raise a family in New York City? What would that require from me as a professional musician? And the prospect of being on the road 8, 9, 10 months of the year in order to be able to afford it while my kids were at home was not one I liked. So it seemed like a good time to retire from really pursuing it vocationally. I still do perform occasionally. I do a little bit of work here and there just because I love it, and it's a central part of my life. My wife is also a former musician, so it's a central part of our family life as well, and I value it enormously. But it's a very hard thing to pursue as a profession, even if it's the only thing you want. And I knew that there were other things I wanted in my life, and my love of teaching and my love of sort of the intellectual exercise of teaching was such that I knew that was the better track for me long term. So it's been since then that I sort of haven't been actively pursuing it as a profession, but it's still around. If you come and hang out in my living room, you'll hear me play the piano and sing occasionally.
Got it, Jacob. Jacob, you said you got heavily involved in the business development for the company that you worked with for like 10 years, right? What was that like?
Well, we had a lot of discussions about ways to expand the way we thought about attracting new clientele. The old paradigm, I had a conversation about this earlier this week. The old paradigm was that if you wanted to start a tutoring company, you found a brick and mortar location, you found an office that had classrooms in it and maybe one large classroom for testing. You hung your shingle, you went out to the local high schools and the local middle schools, and you talk to the guidance counselors and you say, we're here, this is what we do you have any clients? And you build your business locally, and it grows, and your clients come to you, they call the office, they say, I want to work with a tutor, you hand them somebody, and that's it. It was clear in the late 2000s into 2010 that things were beginning to change, that
Right.
the internet was changing things, access to information was changing things, people wanted something different from their tutors. So we thought a lot about how we could be more flexible with our clients to provide a more comprehensive service, a more robust service. So we expanding ourselves into sort of full service, not just specific test tutoring, but as academic consultant. And so we did a
Right.
lot of work in figuring out what that model looked like. And actually, that client that had 4 kids, that was, the great test was, we've got 4 kids, and I want to be sort of the central hub for everything that they need academically. They can just come to me and ask the question,
Right.
and either I have the answer for them and I can provide the service, or I'm one call away from being able to provide that service for them. So that was what we pushed for. It was also that when you are, especially in New York, you're dealing with high net worth families. There's a lot of travel involved. They're in multiple places at once, and figuring out how to make sure that they get all the service they need.
Right.
Especially with as many kids in as many schools and moving around, and from maybe not from cradle, but from probably about the age of 10 all the way through college. How can you make sure that they have a consistent presence in their life?
Got it, Jacob. And what is Nexus Academics like today, currently?
It's an interesting question. It has changed very often over the last 10 years, partially because my interests have changed and partially because the needs of the client have changed. When I started in 2012, I was very much in the 2 to 3 high volume clients. So I would have 2 or 3 kids at one time. I would see them 3 to 6 hours a week. It was very heavily focused on academic consulting, full service academic consulting. When COVID happened, especially,
Right.
and the SAT became optional at most American universities, everybody had to take a step back and say, what are we going to do here? What do we really need from tutoring? Additionally, so many of the kids were out of the classroom in the United States for at least 6 months, if not 18 months, that the need for daily or multiple weekly sessions with an academic tutor, it wasn't really necessary anymore. They had far more flexibility, they had far more interaction with their peers, and they didn't really need what they had prior. So my focus shifted, and I went out looking for what the next market was. And the market need became graduate exams. So many people left the workplace in favor of going back to school, that I had business school and law school applicants just flying at me if I was looking for them out in the social media world. So I joined 10 Facebook groups and subscribed to God knows how many subreddits, and joined Discord groups, and went out looking for those college age and adult students who were looking for tutoring help. but the business model also changed. So today, I'm in a position where, again, I have to be ultra flexible, but I'm not doing it with a single student anymore. It's not, oh, I have to tutor you in 7 subjects and every standardized test that comes your way. Instead, it's what service can I provide for the 35-year-old single mother of 2 who's trying to go back to law school, who has a couple $100s to spare, but really needs help, or, the one who's been through 3 or 4 digital programs and classes for their GRE or their GMAT and needs a little kick to get over the line. So there's far more marketing than there used to be, but it's soft marketing. I'm not taking out ads or anything. It's me getting in chat rooms and me getting on Facebook and posting help and interacting directly with clients. This is why I say that, the model that I had back in 2003, there was an office line, and they called the office line and say, I want a tutor, and you sign up for a tutor, and that's your tutor for the next 6 months. And it's not that it's not that way at all anymore, but that's certainly not the plurality of my work, even probably not even the majority of it. Most of the time, it's sort of in this fractional role of adding value where I can be especially valuable to people. It feels great. It feels great that I can add that value for people that really want it. But it's not quite as sure-footed as it used to be.
Got it, Jacob. So, a couple of questions. I'll probably start off with this. How was the shift from high school academics to graduate exams, right? Is it even a thing, or did you have to prepare for it? How was the transition?
In terms of the content, the transition wasn't too tough.
Okay.
The truth is that so take SAT to GRE. And of course, this is, when I made the shift, this was pre-2005. So, for those who are my age, you'll remember the SAT at that time was 2 sections. It was verbal and it was math. And the GRE functionally was the same thing. And the content was almost identical. And really the only difference was that GRE vocabulary was harder, the reading passages were more challenging in terms of the density of the information. But fundamentally, the process of the test was the same. The shift is actually has to do with the clientele. It has to do with who the student is, why they're there, how motivated they are, and also how fixed they are about their own intelligence and ability. And so there are some pluses and minuses, right? Most graduate level applicants really want to be there because they really want to go to grad school. There's the occasional kid whose parents are pushing them into something, but especially once you get to adults in the workplace who are choosing to go back to school, they have a ton of motivation for being there. But on the flip side, those people, partially due to, entrenchment in the workplace, but also due to some not great teaching back in the 70s and 80s and 90s when we were taught, and we didn't know as much about fostering growth mindset out of our students. Oftentimes they're very fixed about what they believe they can do and are capable of in terms of learning new concepts, learning new material, learning new ways of doing things. There's a lot of digging in of heels when it comes to learning math. Oh, I'm not good at math. Oh, I've never been good at math. Oh, I don't know how. Oh, isn't there just a formula I can learn? So that sometimes becomes a problem especially when it's math based. But that's GRE. When it comes to GMAT, and especially when it comes to LSAT, things become far more skill-based. And when they're skill-based and not content-based, then it's really about, there's still a growth aspect to it. And you still have to sort of foster that and remind them that building skill has to do with commitment to process and one day at a time and train for the marathon and all of that. But because it's not something that they believe they were supposed to have learned in high school and never did, that part of things isn't as difficult. And And there's still, obviously, there's a great advantage when it comes to motivation. They really want the goal. The challenge is keeping them focused on the long-term process, because what they want is results quickly. Adult students are very bad about that. They want to see the improvement in score right away, because I'm sure you know this, most of these people that are going on to grad school, they've had great academic successes in their past. They're used to being really good at things. And so when they face something that they're not immediately good at, or, okay, it's all right that I'm not immediately good at it, but as soon as I learn it, I'm going to be able to execute, right? And then they can't do that. That's a big problem for them. They get discouraged very quickly. So convincing an adult student, it's okay for this to be a 3 to 6 month process. The marathon is a great example. You can't train for a marathon in 3 weeks, no matter how much you run. And if you try to run that much in 3 weeks, you're going to hurt yourself, and it's going to make things worse, right? So a bit at a time, nice and slow, absorb, let things become natural and habitual, and let the change be long-term. For me, when it comes to teaching adult students, I really love it. I mean, I get a great deal of satisfaction working with the ones that want to be there, have a specific goal in mind, are highly motivated for growth and change. But that's not to say that I don't love the teenagers. I mean, I just came from a session with a 12-year-old who's applying into high school, and I love it, and I love working with her. I mean, she's a delight. But it's as with everything, and I think this is probably the appeal of private tutoring as opposed to classroom teaching. The variety is what makes it fun, exciting, and challenging, right? If all this was early on in my tutoring years, all I did was tutor for the SAT. And I would have 20 students, each for an hour a week, and it was the same process every week, going over the same questions with the same worksheets, and it was just, there was so much repetition. And because there's so much repetition, with companies that are hiring huge volumes of tutors, oftentimes you get people that only last 6 months, a year and a half, and they burn out and they leave, because that sort of vitality of the teaching interaction isn't there, because it feels repetitive. And so for me, getting to mix it up with different tests, different kinds of students, different age students, different subjects, that's what keeps it fresh and exciting. So,
got it, Jacob. Jacob, you spoke about content-based and skill-based. What is the difference between the two?
So, I don't think the lines are quite as clear as I make them. Obviously, there is skill involved in the SAT and the ACT to a certain degree, but I think let's take the math section as an example. If you take a math section on an SAT or on an ACT, if you've been exposed to the concepts, right? If you've been exposed to in class the idea of simplifying an algebraic expression, or how to read a coordinate plane, or what trigonometric functions are, how to do translations of a trigonometric function, there isn't a lot of skill in answering the question if you already know the content. There are some skills you can learn to help you answer the question more quickly, or avoid silly mistakes, or to find a correct answer even if you don't quite understand what's happening. So there are those skills. Those are the tips and tricks that you'll read about in the books. But for me, it's not that it's bad teaching to teach those things. I think the students should know those things. But if you want to give a student a firm footing on the test, start with the content. Start and make sure that they know the math. And then you say, okay, and now, rather than doing all of that arithmetic and estimating pi at 3.14 and having to do all that mess, do some rounding and sort of guesstimate, or take the answers and plug them back in, and maybe that's a faster way to the answer. But if you don't know the math, you're never going to be able to know for sure that your answer is correct. So right. in terms of content, that's why I say the SAT, the ACT are content-based tests. Right. The LSAT, on the other hand, is almost entirely skill-based. There's very little to learn for the LSAT, especially now that logic games are not on the test. Logic games, there was sort of a set of ideas that you could learn. You still had to figure out how to apply them because the breadth of ways that you could apply them was bigger than math on the SAT and ACT. But now that those are gone, the LSAT is, in the simplest way, just a reading test. You have a stimulus, you have to read it, you have to understand it and analyze it, and then you have to answer a question about it. It's just a reading test, which means the content is small. You're not learning lists of vocabulary like you have to do on the GRE, right? You're not doing sentence completions. You're not doing analogies or antonyms or synonyms like you do on some of the lower level tests. It's read the stimulus, understand what the argument is about, understand the implications in it, and be able to fluently say, okay, what's its conclusion? What's flawed about it? What would make it valid? What would strengthen it? What would weaken it? Is it an argument of certainty? Is it an argument of induction, of probability? There are some concepts, but this is all about application. And again, this sort of takes us back to this analogy of running. Running is a very simple skill. I mean, obviously there's technique, and you have to get better at the technique, but to get good at running, you don't have to learn a lot of things. You have to hone the skill, and you have to improve it incrementally over time. That's what the LSAT requires. The SAT and ACT, yes, there's some of that, but a lot of it is about, no, you have to learn what this is, and you have to work through you have to learn about exponents, logarithms, and work out those ideas. And once you've got them, the application of them is relatively straightforward. It's not straightforward, but as compared to what you have to do on the LSAT, it's relatively straightforward.
Got it, Jacob. So, Jacob, you said you've transitioned from teaching teenagers to, graduate exams, but you still continue to teach teenagers. Like you said, you just, are coming off teaching a 12-year-old. So what's the split between the students that you have that are teenagers and the ones that are doing LSAT or GRE or GMAT?
It's interesting. It's about half and half of my time, but obviously the teenagers are weekly. I have 3 ACT students right now. No, 2 ACT students, 1 digital SAT, and 1 SSAT IC. I have a couple of admissions consulting folks who are younger, and that's about half my time. But they're every week. Right, once a week or twice a week, every week. The adult students, I have more of them. I see them less often, because there is, we'll get deep into the pedagogy here, but when it comes to a younger student, they're not as capable at driving their own learning. They need more oversight. They need more scaffolding, and so you need to be there no matter how bright they are. Their brains aren't ready to manage that part of things. At about age 10, they can at least sort of deal with the doing of the task. But there's still sort of this like, okay, what's next? And how do I progress to the next thing? And you have to do that for them. So, after we're done, I have to make 6 worksheets to send to this kid on simplifying radicals and a couple of other things. But the adult students, it's not that they wouldn't benefit from they would benefit from my oversight in the short term. But if you're 30 years old and you want to go back to law school, I'm doing you a massive disservice by spoon feeding you the LSAT. I really am. I already know that it's a bit of a disservice for the 16-year-olds. You have to do it to a certain degree, but half of what I do with them is encouraging them on the metacognitive level, right? Like, what do you think you should do next? How do you think you should review this? That's what I'm asking them every week, every day. They have to start being cognizant of managing their own learning. But the 30-year-old student, they're past that point, right? It's no longer like, I can tell them, here's a structure for you, but I'm not checking in daily with you. If you can't do this, guess what? You're going to get to law school or you're going to get to business school. You're going to have 1,000 pages a week. You're going to have to distill that into a casebook or into notes in a way that you have no idea what's in front of you. You better start learning to self-manage at this point. And I don't think it's a good it's not a good use of your time to show up to a Zoom call with me 3 times a week to have me say, okay, let's look at an LSAT question together. Right? That's not helpful. What you should be doing, and I mean, if you want to talk about it, we should certainly talk about this. But when it comes to standardized testing for an adult student, there's a very well-worn path of testing and review that if they can structure it well, they can accomplish 90% of the task on their own, right? They'll take the test, they'll take a break, they'll do a full review of the test before they even know the answers. Question by question, what's the best approach to this question? How can I best get to the right answer? I don't even know what's correct yet, but I'm going to take another stab at it, not to try to get the right answer, but do I understand what's even on the page, right? So I call that the time test is sort of the competitive version. So I take a shot at it. But this is the cognitive version. What do I know? What do I even know about this question? And then when you're done with that, and that could be 5 times as long as the time section, just doing that sort of what we call blind review, just a blind review of that section. And then at the end of that, they correct it time, they correct that blind review version of it, they see what they got right and wrong, and then do it a 3rd time, still without me. Right? Go to number 1, review it. Oh, I got it right timed. Oh, I got it right in my blind review. I did it the way I should have done it, and I confirmed that in my blind review. Good job, right? Good pats on the back for me is a win, positive motivation going forward, affirmation that I've done the right thing. But then I get to number 5. I got it right, but I really had no idea what was going on. I just sort of rushed and guessed. But when I took the time, I did understand it. So here's a trigger for me. This is what I should think about in that situation. Number 12, got it wrong the first time, fixed my mistake. I missed this thing. How should I have caught that mistake, right? Always about how, why. And then number 18, I had no idea. I got it wrong both times. Let me see if I can backwards engineer it now that I know the right answer. Let me go check some resources, blah, 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 blah. And then I get to the end of that 3rd review. I have sort of an action plan, but I've also got my list of questions for Jake, right? And here's my list of questions, right? Like numbers 14, 18, and 23, I had no idea, and I have no idea how I could even have known that. But also on a process basis, how am I supposed to cope with this kind of wording? Or how am I supposed to cope with, when an early question has taken me too much time? Those are the things they should be bringing to sessions with me. I don't expect that of a 15-year-old. I've tried it. It doesn't really work with 15-year-olds. But with adult students, it really does work if they'll give it a shot, if they'll really invest in it. And you talk about like what motivates me as a teacher. I love seeing the young adult realize just what they're capable of if they start working the right way. Now I'm really going to get on my educational soapbox. We spend so much time with kids in school being taught to perform in a certain way, right? The thing we expect of them in the classroom is, here's the lesson, I just taught it in the classroom, here's some work, go take that work and do it the way I taught it to you, bring it back and show it to me, great, now you know it. No, they don't. They know how to do what you told them to do, but do they actually know it? We have no idea. But that's the way students are trained to respond to teaching. And so if a student comes to me, they'll say, well, what should I do? And I'll say, well, here's the process I want. No. What should I do? Well, if I tell you that, you're just going to do it. But that isn't going to translate to actual knowledge, actual skill, actual improvement. I tell the kids I tell my students the first time they come in, I say, you want to learn tennis. Are you going to go watch a video of Serena Williams playing tennis? No. You have to go out on the court and you have to try and you have to fail. You have to fail hard, right? And then you review with somebody who knows what they're doing and they give you a couple of things to change. And you train and then you try again. And you play another match and you play another match. The next Serena Williams won't be born out of pure natural talent. That person will be honed over time by their own love of the game and by coaches and peers and whatever who invest in them. And it's the same with, this is why the LSAT is a skill-based test, why the GMAT portions of the GMAT are skill-based tests, because it's not something you can simply learn and do. I walked into that test 20 years ago. I had a very good diagnostic score. I had no idea what I was doing. I walked in, I gave it my best shot, I got a good score. But how am I supposed to teach this? How am I supposed to teach people to be good at this? I don't know. So that's where the investment in what is the process of doing it. We have that for math. This is why SAT and ACT is so content-based. We have those algorithms, right? There are many algorithms to do the math in, right? I was teaching percentages today to my student, and she was doing it in a certain way. She was trying to do it as an algebraic equation. I said, why don't you try it as a proportion? And she said, oh, that's great. And she knew how to do proportions. She knew how to cross multiply. And suddenly it clicked for her. Oh, I could set it up as a proportion. But once she has that, she can just do it because she's done it in the classroom. There is no model for that, for the LSAT, for the GMAT, for rhetorical analysis. There's no model for that. People have tried. They try to apply classical philosophy to it. They try to apply conditionality, like conditional rules, if-then statements to it. It works to a certain degree, but it's more subtle than that. It has to do with real-world scenarios. It's mixing and matching classical philosophy with, statistics and with... It's just a more complex system than that. As you can tell, I really love this test. I really love the LSAT and the GMAT. I think they're great.
Speaking of which, Jacob, you clearly differentiated what it is for you to teach teenagers and, the older folks.
Yeah.
And teaching is not one-dimensional, or it's not defined, right? It's a very subjective thing. And what encompasses teaching, the thing that you do with the teenagers, and what is it with the older ones? For example, a lot of people that I've spoken to, test prep, it involves one component of teaching is the subject matter, right? The subject related stuff. Another thing is the mental aspect of it. And some of the teachers, I've not met a lot of them, some of them go a step ahead and help students retain that information with techniques, right? Because one of the big problems that teenagers face is retention of what they learn. Whereas maybe for 30-year-olds, it's totally from a coaching level. And, you just review, stay far, and just point them to the thing. So do you have a clear process to your teaching?
It's an interesting question. First of all, I think that the concept that teaching is more than simply the subject matter is absolutely right. For me, the way I communicate it, I don't know if this is entirely accurate, but it's about 25% content. It's about 25% therapist. Especially with the teenagers, it's about 25% family counselor,
right.
Negotiating and navigating the relationship with their parents, their relationship with their parents, to make sure that their parents are investing positively, and then it's about 25% best friend.
Wow. Okay.
And what's really interesting, I don't know when this day will come. I'm worried. One of the ways that I always thought that I was effective is because I was closer in age to them than their parents were. They always believed that I understood them better than their parents did. Whether that was true, certainly not true. But you engender trust with a student, and they come to you with their problems, and they're more honest with you.
Right.
And then you can get to the heart of the problem. Now, unfortunately, I'm 46. As you can see, I've got some gray in my beard. I'm losing my ability to convince them that I am in fact their peer and can be their compatriot. But I do think there's this sense of collegiality between tutor and student that isn't there with classroom teachers by virtue of the fact that a classroom teacher has to be a figure of authority. And I don't want to be a figure of authority. I say this to the parents all the time. Don't make me be bad cop. It's not because I can't do it. Of course I can. I have my own kids. I can be bad cop with them. But if I'm bad cop with my students, they will stop trusting me and they'll stop being honest with me.
It's against the very purpose of what you do, right?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be the person they come to first. Jake, help. And then I encourage them to be honest with their teachers and honest with their parents. So that's one. I think that's sort of the mix. I spend a lot of time fostering that relationship. It's why with the teenagers that regularity is important. I want them to have access to me. I want them to be able to know that they're going to see me in a couple of days. They'll see me in a week. They can always reach out to me by text or whatever it is. In terms of the difference in teaching style, I'm a big believer in not adhering to a curriculum. I don't think a curriculum works. If I'm going to force feed you a standardized set of content over the course of time, just go buy the book, right? Princeton Review did this 45 years ago. Kaplan did the same. Go read the book. It has all the content in it. If you can't learn it from the book, well, fine, I'll help you through it. But the truth is, my expertise is there to cut through all of the unnecessary stuff and get at what you really need. That's why, this teenager that I'm working with, the 12-year-old that I'm working with now, she doesn't need most of the book. She's got 7 of them sitting on her kitchen table. Most of that is junk. Let's figure out what you don't know, and then I'm going to give you some worksheets to progress you through it now that I've taught you what you need. And once you're on the other side of it, then you're going to take another test and you'll improve and you'll improve and you'll improve. That's where the expertise is necessary. In terms of the differentiation in teaching between the teenagers and the adults, that's hard. Part of it is that there's some confounding factors there, right? Like, mostly with teenagers, I'm doing content-based work. It's either the SAT or ACT, or it's school subjects. Whereas with the adults, I'm usually doing the LSAT, unless it's the occasional GMAT, the occasional GRE. And once in a while, over 20 years of tutoring, I've had a number of undergraduate level kids that have stayed on with me from high school, and I've done, college stats, or I've, worked on some papers with them, things like that. But it's rare with an adult student that I'll be doing something that's highly content-based. So it's a really different sort of paradigm to begin with. But I will say, I think back, I had an adult student. She was in her late 40s who was taking a statistics class. She went back to do a second master's. And working with her on stats was different from working on stats with a high school senior. In certain ways, she was much more likely to actually do the work, which was great. But she was also a little more fixed in the way she thought about things, because she had been doing it that way for 20 years. It's often hard to get adults to break old habits. It's really frequent that you'll get an adult student who won't differentiate their practice because they say, well, I'm here, I'm already scoring well, I'm already doing well, I just need that extra little kick. Can't you just give me one thing to add on? And I'll say, no, you're at the ceiling here. Doing it the way that you're doing it, this is as well as you're going to do. I'm not going to undo you. I'm not going to remold you in my image. You're you. But there are some things that you need to change, and they're really loath to do it. That you really have to encourage them to be open to the idea that there will be better ways, and you'll get there quickly, but you have to be open to changing in the immediate. Teenagers are more malleable than that. Teenagers are more willing to sort of say, there's a better way? Oh, great, I love better ways. Okay, fine. Whereas adults, we all get a little grumpy in our old age, right?
Got it, Jacob. Jacob, moving on to the business side of things, have you ever thought of, adding more team members, scaling up, growing as an organization?
I have. And I've played with a lot of different ways to do it. When I started out, I had a partner, and he and I worked together on business development. And he was working sort of half-time with me while he was doing other things. I have brought on other team members over the course of the year, people that have come and gone. In my years with my previous company, I saw a paradigm which is not unique to them. This is true across the board with tutoring companies that are not publishing companies. I'll put Princeton and Kaplan aside, as those are publishing companies that teach classes. But for a company that sort of does one-on-one tutoring and has a body of tutors to send out in the world, there's sort of this pyramid, pyramid hierarchy that happens, right? Where you have leadership at the top, and there are a couple of people up there, a CEO and then a couple of senior level tutors. And then there's sort of a mid-level series of tutors that are long-term professionals that are doing it full time. But then there's this huge bottom layer of tutors that come in for 1 or 2 or 3 years and get burned out and leave. And there's this constant revolving door of new tutors every year, people coming in. And it's very rare. 1 out of 10 maybe will end up doing it as a living. And so when I started my company, I resolved to say, I don't want to do it that way, because I don't want to have to constantly manage the relationship between the families and a new tutor in case things aren't going well. I don't want to have to do all the recruiting. I would rather be a place where people who are already established education professionals could come for support, a little bit of administrative help, covering overhead, but really be more of a collective than anything. So I've always had an open door to other professionals that I've met over the last 10, 12 years, and said, listen, come on in. I'm not going to take 2/3 of your fee. That's not what I'm here for, right? It costs me about 10% of your fee to sort of, in terms of payroll taxes and, a little bit of overhead and whatever. So, depending on where they are and how much work I'm doing, I'll take anywhere from like 10 to 25%, but leave my tutors earning the vast majority of their money. Empower them to do their own marketing, their own development, their own teaching. If they need materials, I have a huge library of materials that I'll make available to anybody working for me. I'll be there to lend support. But I don't want to become just another tutoring agency with a huge group of young tutors that I don't know if they're good teachers yet. I mean, it takes ages to find out if somebody's going to be, whether or not they're a good teacher, whether they're going to love teaching and be committed to teaching. It's hard because obviously I want the business to grow, and I know that the bigger it gets, the bigger it gets, right? It becomes a snowball effect. But there are a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of noise in the market, and even more so now in the last 5 years, right? All the social media, sort of virality of social media makes it really hard for potential clients to tell the difference. They gravitate toward the companies that they know and have heard of, and without making comment on any company or another, right? Like, if people are looking to spend a certain amount of money, they're going to go out into one of the marketplaces to Varsity or to one of the other places where they can pick up a tutor for $30-$40 an hour. If they're doing a specific kind of test, right? If they're doing the SAT, they'll go to Kaplan and Princeton Review first. And if they want a one-on-one tutor, they'll look up who the local people are, and they'll shop by price. And it's, with LSAT, it's highly specific. There are companies that specialize in it. There are all these digital courses out there, and to try to compete in that way against those people, it's really hard. So, I would, that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, of course, I would and am willing to grow the business, but it has to be the right teachers that actually want to teach rather than to pick up some money on the side, that are really committed to it. And then I want to empower them to be the best teachers they can be. I don't want to artificially grow my roster simply to do so. So right now I've got 4 or 5 people that work with me, mostly on the LSAT side because that market is really big. I'm usually picking up the SAT and ACT kids, and occasionally I have a couple of people I can call if I've got overrun, and we're happy to keep it that way.
Got it, Jacob. Makes sense. And Jacob, coming to the tools that you use, or rather, before we go into tools, what is your, where do you find your students from? Are they mostly word of mouth? Or you said you spend some time posting stuff on social media and stuff like that?
So word of mouth is important for the high school kids, for the parents of the high school kids, because
Right.
it's a big investment and it's a long time. They generally they'll ask, their friends, who did you work with, blah blah blah. The interesting thing is that now that I'm in my mid-40s, I've got friends who have high schoolers, so they're starting to
Right.
come to me. So that's nice. I like that. So I'm getting a little roster of kids that are living in neighborhoods close to me because of friends with high school age kids. But for the graduate exams, those adult students don't generally look toward the local tutoring companies. They're out there because they are adept in social media, and not Instagram or TikTok, but Reddit, Discord, content-based
Right.
social media. There's so much information in those places that's generally where they're going. There's a Facebook group that has 25,000 members that's dedicated to LSAT prep. It's
Wow.
amazing. Yeah. The subreddit, I forget how many individual posters there are on the subreddit, but it's over 100,000. There are 3 or 4 incredibly active Discord groups. So I've found that it's actually more fruitful for me to spend, I'll devote an hour a day rather than spending $500 a week on Facebook ads, which I've tried it. It doesn't work. People
Right.
they don't buy, or Google ads or things like that, because I'm never going to compete with Princeton Review, or, they're just spending more money than I am. Instead, if I spend an hour of my day interacting with actual people on Reddit, on Discord, on Facebook, giving advice, offering free consultations, I probably have 3 or 4 consultations a week, and I probably convert, I don't know, 20% into at least one session, if not more. It's not huge, but it doesn't have to be huge, right?
Right. Right.
And and there are times when I'll have an enormous volume. September and October were fantastic. And then, on the other side of application season, come spring, it's going to be slow. Because that's when testing season is slow. And so I'll shift to other things. But that's generally what's happening right now. It's sort of a combination of word of mouth, and I'll get those students who I've converted from social media also spreading the word for me. There's a little bit of actual marketing, but right now the real investment is investment of my time. If I offer pro bono sessions, group pro bono sessions, an hour a week, show up, ask me anything you want. I'll go over a couple of concepts. They get to know me. It's I've converted so much more that way than cold calling pre-law societies, and I've tried that stuff. It's just that like I said, there's so much noise in the market for somebody to get a cold call from somebody that they haven't heard of, and they say, well, why would I send it to Nexus Academics when I've heard of Princeton Review, and they have a course, and I could send them to Testmasters and Blueprint, have been around 25 years, and I've heard of them. I'll just send people there, and we'll organize it in-house, and the kids won't have to pay for it, and I'll just do that. So I think for the individual tutor or for the small shop, dedicating some resources to interacting with real people on social media, it's a great boon to us as tutors that we have access to our students in that way, in a way that we did not even 5 years ago.
Got it, Jake. And the teenagers that you teach, is it virtual or do you meet them in person?
It's mostly virtual these days. Depends on where they are. There are occasions and there are students for whom it really does have to be in person. But, COVID really changed everything for everybody. And the teenagers have gotten used to working on Zoom or Google Meet. They did classes that way. They work with me that way. When it's just me and them, they can't get away with playing video games at the same time. I've seen students do that in class, but they can't do that with me. So most of them are meeting virtually. Certainly almost all of the adult students are meeting virtually. Any kid younger than high school age, if you're middle schooler or younger, it's really hard to get anything done virtually. It's really hard.
Right.
So I tend to insist that the middle schoolers and the elementary schoolers that I do in person. But beyond that, at this point, there are so many tools available to us, right? I use a virtual whiteboard. I've got my trusty iPad Air here with my Apple Pencil. So I'm writing on that. They can see the board. I'm sharing the board. I'd love to be able to sort of do an interactive board with both of us, but it turns out that it's not actually necessary. I only really use the board when I need to demonstrate something. The truth is that everybody is using telepresence at this point, right? Doctors are doing it, therapists are doing it, classroom teachers are doing it. We're all having meetings this way. Here, you and I are having an hour-long discussion about education virtually, halfway across the world. There's no reason why we can't teach this way, as long as we know that our students are invested and really engaged. Gauging engagement is hard. The younger they are, the harder it becomes. I've got one or two right now that sometimes it's hard for me to tell if they're really paying attention. And I'm gonna, I think I'm sort of butting up against the time when I'm gonna have to say, I think we should change, maybe still do virtual, but maybe I want you to start doing the writing on the whiteboard instead of me doing the writing on the whiteboard. Those are the times when I start asking more questions and saying fewer things, right? Just why is that true? Why is that true? Explain it to me, teach it to me, kind of stuff, just to make sure they're not zoning out. But 10 years ago, had you asked me, I would have said, nope, not possible. It'll never work. But we were forced into it. We're forced into it, and here we are, and it kind of works. Yeah, it kind of works.
Great. And is it just one-on-one, or do you do group as well?
No, I do group classes this way too.
Oh wow! Okay. That must be even more difficult.
In a certain way it is, but like Google Meet is great for a group class, and I've done it that way. I used Zoom early on, but I found that I'm a big fan of integrating all my technology, and so I've got a Google Workspace, and I use a scheduling program that integrates more seamlessly with Google than it does with Zoom. And
so Google Suite is the tool tech stack that you use.
Yeah. But then, Discord has all this built in as well. So I'll go to Discord and I'll say, hey, I'm gonna hang out in this voice chat for the next half hour. Anybody want to come and talk about X, Y, or Z? And they'll all show up, and I'll have my camera on, and I'll share my screen, and I'll do the whiteboard, and it's the same thing. And I spent the second half of 2020 and all of 2021. Through Facebook, I met another guy who was in a similar position to me. He's a little older than me. Taught SATs for Princeton Review, then went back to law school. Spent 2 years in big law, hated it. And left and went and started teaching LSATs for a couple of big companies, and was out on his own. And so he and I got together and said, hey, let's teach together because we like each other and we sort of understand each other. And we spent a year and a half where we went through a different LSAT practice test over the course of 2 weeks for a year and a half. And we had classes of between 5 and 20 people twice a week for 18 months, all over Zoom. And it was fantastic. I mean, the results were amazing. Again, I think it's easier with adult students than it is with teenagers. I very rarely taught group SAT, ACT. Very rarely. I just don't think it works. There's an occasion where I'll get siblings. But even then I try to split them up. I've done some like work for nonprofits that do like mentoring for disadvantaged kids in the city, and so I'll do group classes there, and it's okay. But if you really want to be effective, I think teenagers need the one-on-one time. They need the attention to detail. But with LSAT, it definitely works. And there, it's a lot of value. And I'm the one on camera. I get probably 1 in 5 who will turn on the camera. It's
okay. You don't make it mandatory or something.
No. It was great having 2 of us teach those group classes too, because then I could have one of us would man the chat room while the other one was talking. And people were much more willing to talk in the chat than they were to unmute.
Switch on the video
and switch on the video and actually ask a question. But there were some who were, and the value was really there. I mean, it was a really great way of teaching in a time when, you want to talk about COVID. So I live in New York City. I live about half a mile from the hospital in New York that was what they called the epicenter of the epicenter. So it was the one hospital where everybody got sick. So sirens going by my window every 5 minutes for about 2 months. So in that time, I had 2 small kids at home. My wife was working from home. So I started working from my bedroom closet. So we cleared out a room in a little tiny space in my bedroom closet. I had a tiny little desktop. I had my camera, my screen, and I taught from that closet for 1.5 years. And those classes were all from that closet. But what I found was that, everybody else was confined in the same way, desperate for interaction with people. And this was what people were doing. So it was far more effective than we ever thought it would be. And that spawned what Keith, my partner, and I have built in the last 5 years. This, the LSAT business and the website that we've built and the new curriculum that we're writing. It was all sort of born of that time of teaching those classes and figuring out ways to communicate these skills and work on these skills with people while you're not sitting in front of them, which is the way he and I had been teaching for 20 years. So.
Got it, Jacob. I'll probably conclude with this question.
Sure.
What are probably the top 2 problems that you're trying to solve, if you have any, as a business currently?
In terms of solving things that aren't going well for my business or I want to improve for my business?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. The dream for all, I think this is not just relegated to education professionals, but, everybody has the dream of passive income. And it was easy as a 25-year-old to dedicate 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 5 days a week, and all of my Saturday to teaching. But I've got 2 kids and a family, and I need a little more flexibility than that. And so finding ways to generate passive income are important for me. So that's why, Keith and I have been working on subscription models, ways to, like I said before, I'm not a big believer, especially for standardized testing, in fixed curriculum. So, it's not that I wouldn't write a book, and, I would love to write a book. I have tons of ideas for it. But writing another curriculum for the digital SAT or for the ACT or for the LSAT, I don't see there's a lot of value add there. But if I can find a way to generate passive income for myself, I would love to do that without having to hire a team of young tutors to do the work for me, because I don't, like I said, I don't think that's the answer either. So I am trying to solve for that. The other one is maintaining authenticity in the advertising space. There's sort of this phenomenon of, and I don't know if they're legitimate or not, but they're, every couple months, this like wave of new tutoring companies and new tutors shows up on each of these social media platforms. Oh, I have a new curriculum. Oh, I have a new thing, and only 90% discount, and for only $20 an hour, and blah 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 blah. And it's so attractive. Excuse me, so attractive to test takers who are trying to find value. What's the harm? I'll go with this guy. It seems so cheap, and he seems so. I don't want to push in a way that feels inauthentic and have people feel as if I'm somehow fishing for work, because, depending on the platform, especially on Reddit, as soon as you advertise, you're a pariah, right? They'll stop paying attention to you at all. I've seen accounts that show up, they drop one advertisement, and suddenly it's like all kinds of nasty stuff going around. So I have to avoid that, but I have to continue to generate business and interest. And so finding that perfect balance is is a real challenge, especially when, these social media platforms, I hate to age myself again, but social media platforms are not built for people in their mid 40s, and the people that are on them are for the most part not in their mid 40s. So you want to make sure you're communicating in the right way and that you're sort of maintaining professionalism while still feeling authentic and real. And it's hard. It's a hard balance to strike, and knowing how much time and energy and effort to devote to that, to make sure I'm getting as much value as I can out of it, while not feeling like I'm sort of saturating those boards with things that just sort of feel like revenue generating ideas. I don't want to be that. I want to be somebody that they trust and want to engage. And then I say, listen, I'm a professional. Like, I'm happy to continue working with you, and that's the time that you transition. So I think those are sort of the two pain points for me. Especially in a shifting market, right? The world is ever shifting, and it's really hard to keep up with the ways that it changes. And so, it's constant engagement is the name of the game.
Jacob, thanks so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jag. I appreciate it.